Who was that on the phone, George?
That was you.
Oh.
Hi, Janice. Good morning.
Good morning,
Hi, Amy.
Rabbi
Good
Cheses.
morning.
Oh, there must be something wrong with my computer. I don't hear you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't hear you. We'll find out if Janie hears you.
Amy, can you hear me?
Let me know if other people hear you. Janie, do you hear me? Oh, George, there's something wrong. I can't hear the rabbi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let me try muting and unmuting. Unmute. Is that any better? No.
We can hear you, but I don't think you can hear us. Hi, Amy. Good morning. Hi,
Morning.
Mark. Good morning. Good to see everyone. Janie, how are you?
No, I can't hear the rabbi, but the rabbi
Just
can hear me.
multitasking, so I hope you don't mind if I have my breakfast while we're doing it.
Me too.
I'm gonna be nonstop from now until after my staff meeting at whatever time it ends tonight. It starts at 6:15, so whatever.
Wow. Okay.
My
Sounds like a full
volume was
day
on
ahead.
off. Sorry.
Glad you're with us, Janice, and you can hear us now.
Thank you.
And I'm glad. Feel free to eat. It's important to have it's important not to have a hungry tummy while learning Torah, because then it's much harder to focus and to get something from it. So don't hold back. One of the advantages of Zoom is the ability to eat and to listen at the same time. And I'm home again for the second straight week with another sick child this time. So there's the advantage also of not having to cancel class when I have a sick kid. So we're still benefiting from some of the COVID bonuses, we could call them. But
I heard on the news
Unexpected.
today that Worcester is going back to an indoor mask requirement because of the triple, what they say, the flu, the RSV, and the COVID.
Yeah. Well, I was visiting some members of our shul in Newbridge yesterday in the nursing home and long assisted living facility. And they are for obvious reason, for good reason, everyone is required to wear a mask. That was the first time I put one on in a long time, but it was good to see some people.
At work.
So I'm going to get the source sheet for our class together today and put it in the chat before I share screen.
I'm glad, Mark, you're all better. Yeah.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I had my
great.
flu shot on Sunday, so I'm hoping I won't have any reaction to it.
Hope so too.
I had one on Friday and I had a little bit of a starting cold going into it, and I slept most of Friday night and Shabbos.
Wow.
That's why Friday was good, because I didn't have to do anything for the next 2 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's important to get it, even if there are some trade-offs. But my son has a phobia of needles, which has been really tough. So we had to schedule him to get the flu vaccine through a mist. They have for children the ability to get it through your nose through a mist, but there's like a 2-week waiting period for it. So we aren't able to get it until the middle of November.
Right.
I didn't know
they were
such an
doing
option existed.
They were doing them at my son's yeshiva, and one of my granddaughters, she doesn't like needles either, so she sat on her mom's lap, and it was such a little nothing. You didn't even see the needle. You're looking in the other direction. They were Dunkin' Donuts. In New York, the Dunkin' Donuts are kosher, so they had the donuts and everything. She's looking that way, and it was done, and no Band-Aid, no nothing, and it was over before she even noticed it.
Yeah. Well, that's they had a flu clinic, flu vaccine clinic at Shas, where they went through like 90% of the kids in one day, which was fantastic. But and that was their strategy, distraction. But my son, it wasn't enough. So
That's it. Too smart for his own good. Smart for his own good.
Yeah. So okay, well, it's good to see everyone. Good to catch up a little bit into Kibbutz about our times, as we're still in the long tail of this pandemic, and other flu season concerns are now upon us. We invited some guests for Shabbos, and their daughter had a cold, and they wanted to like credential before bringing her over, and they said, she's coughing and she's sneezing, but she's negative on COVID, she's negative on RSV, she's negative on the flu, and it was just like an actual standard cold, which kids often get and hold on to, but it was just sort of funny how like they had to go through a whole checklist of tests that they've done to rule out all of the potentially dangerous things that could spread.
Your son that's sick now, your child that's sick, could they have gotten it from this other child's cold?
No, I mean, my daughter just has a stomach bug this morning. So yeah, it's not, I don't think it's connected. It's already passed. It just, he just threw up once early this morning, and the school has a rule that if you throw up, you have to stay home for the day, but she's totally fine.
No, good.
I think she just ate some pasta that didn't sit well with her last night. Those things happen too.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've all kibitzed about different maladies and sicknesses, let's dive into our learning this week. Just as a reminder, we have been devoting our Parsha study to Rabbi Jonathan Sacks's book called I Believe, which is the last series he wrote on the weekly Parsha in the last year of his life in 5-7 80, I guess it was about 2.5 years ago. And he used the lens of emunah, of faith, to interpret the weekly parsha. And as our theme of the year as a community is tefillah, which is the language of emunah, I thought it would be appropriate for us to be focusing on emunah, on faith in the parsha. And so last week we spoke about the faith we have in the Torah and the openness of our world, our Torah world, to the outside world, and having a window and not a door. And that was part of the commandment of the Tzohar, Ta'aseh, the opening to the outside world that Noah was supposed to make, even when he was protecting himself from the storm raging outside. I mentioned at the very end of last week that we were going to be launching into my favorite piece of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. This is actually taken from a book that he wrote on this midrash. The book is called A Letter in the Scroll. Has anyone heard of it? Excuse me. So he wrote a whole book called A Letter in the Scroll, or Radical Then, Radical Now is how it was published in the UK. It's a book that's based on the midrash that we are going to land on soon. But before we get there, I want to take us on a little bit of a journey to understand and appreciate why Avraham. This is a question that we have to ask when we think about Avraham being spoken to at the beginning of our parsha with the words Lech Lecha, of you shall surely go, pick up all your belongings, pack up, take your suitcases, your camels, and just leave everything that's familiar, your family, your father's house, and go to a place I'll show you. He doesn't even tell him where, he just says, start walking. And why is Hashem in conversation with this Avraham figure? We know why Hashem chose Noah. Why did he choose Noah?
Noah was righteous.
Exactly. Noah ish tzaddik haya. He was a righteous man. And so, of course, there was reason to focus and to trust and to partner with someone who carried certain values. When it comes to Moshe, why was Moshe chosen to deliver the people from the promise, to deliver people from Egypt?
Maybe because he struck the Egyptian to stop him from hurting the Jewish slave.
Right. He intervened when he saw injustice, right? So there was a certain merit to his behavior, which made him deserving of a particular role and responsibility. We see with other characters and other figures in Tanakh that there's a backstory. But with Avraham, we just pick up in the middle of the story, and we don't know the first few chapters. And so there are several attempts to fill in the void, to fill in the narrative gap of Abraham's humble beginnings. And there are two that we're likely familiar with already. What are some of the stories that we hear about Abraham and his early age that make him worthy of this role? What are some examples or stories that come to mind?
He destroyed his father's idols.
The idol.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Mhm.
That's that we have. I have that book upstairs in my kids' library of of Abraham smashing the idols, and then his father comes in and says, "What happened?" And Abraham was smart enough to leave a stick in the hand of the last standing idol, and says, "That guy did it." And Terach says, "Well, the idols can't do anything. He couldn't have done it." And Abram says, "So if they can't do anything, why are you worshiping them?" Right? So he was a sharp young whippersnapper, That's sort of the first classic, origin narrative of Abraham. And that midrash is actually based off a pasuk in Yehoshua, when Yehoshua tells the story of the Jewish people to the Jewish people after they've crossed the Jordan River and are preparing to settle the land of Israel. He gives them sort of a Jewish history 101. And this is in source number 1 in the in the sources in the packet or in the Sefaria sheet that I prepared. And because I just want, so I'll read it and we'll appreciate where the midrash picks up this narrative from. So Vayam Yehoshua el kol ha'am ko amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael be'ever hanahar yashva votechem me'olam. So in the olden times, your forefathers they came and settled this land. So Terach avi Avraham, Terach the father of Abraham, va'avi Nachor, and Nachor v'avdu Elokim acherim. They worshipped other gods. It's really, we could say Elohim acherim, because it's not referring to our God, to Hashem. This is the first time where we see there's evidence of Terach being an idolater. In the Torah, we have just the story of Terach leaving Haran and making his way towards Canaan. That's all we know about him. And then we have this command of Lech Lecha, that Abraham should continue where his father left off on this journey towards Canaan. The pshat of the Torah text is that Terach was a good guy who was headed to Eretz Yisrael, and he started the journey and Abraham just finished it. But this indication from Yehoshua is that actually Abraham was an iconoclast, that he was a rebel who went in the other direction from his father. He reversed the course of his father's trajectory by going against his idolatry. And so that's sort of the first popular narrative for the founding of Abraham's character. The second one, which we might also be familiar with, is Abraham the philosopher. So if the first one is Abraham the rebel or Abraham the iconoclast, Abraham the monotheist, Abraham the monotheist is sort of the first one. The second one is that Abraham came to this relationship with God through reason, through logic, through rational thinking. And this camp is is led by none other than the Rambam, who we might say, was a philosopher himself, and perhaps was projecting a little bit of his own relationship with God onto the founding of ethical monotheism, onto the character of Abraham Avinu. So let's read briefly. I'll read in the English just for the sake of time, because I want to really spend the longest amount of time on the third approach, the third explanation for Abraham's origin. So here, the Mishnah Torah in source number 2 says, this is on the history of idolatry, on the laws of idolatry. The Rambam begins that treatise talking about the history of idolatry, and says about how the first people after talks about Enosh, some of the descendants of Adam started looking up at the stars and the moon and the sun and said, oh, they have power over the world. They give us light and heat. They must be, intermediaries to God. And then the next generation forgot about the God part and just started worshiping the intermediaries. So that's sort of the intellectual history of idolatry. And in the third paragraph of that section, the Rambam writes as follows: after this mighty man was weaned, this is referring to Abraham, he began to explore and think. So this was at a young age. Though he was a child, he began to think incessantly throughout the day and night, wondering, how is it possible for the sphere to continue to revolve without having anyone controlling it? Right? He was wondering why the Earth is spinning and why the sun is moving. Who is causing it to revolve? Surely it does not cause itself to revolve. Abraham had no teacher, nor was there anyone to inform him. Rather, he was mired in Ur Kasdim among foolish idolaters. His father, mother, and all the people around him were idol worshippers, and he would worship them. However, his heart was exploring and gaining understanding. Ultimately, he appreciated the way of truth and understood the path of righteousness through his accurate comprehension. He realized that there was one God who controlled the sphere, that he created everything, and that there is no other God among all the other entities. He knew that the entire world was making a mistake. What caused them to error was their service of the stars and images, which made them lose awareness of the truth. Abraham was 40 years old when he became aware of his creator. So this is Abraham the philosopher. In an age when people were leaning upon idols, Abraham thought through that possibility and realized that it didn't explain all of the questions that he had on the physical universe. And so he thought his way to God, which is an incredible process to think about. It's sort of what some have called the watch. The proof of God is the watchmaker's proof, right? If you discover a watch and you really think about it, you have to come to the conclusion that there's a maker of the watch, because it can't just happen randomly that this complex device is working. So that's the second theory of how Abraham became Abraham. Any comments or thoughts or questions on that approach?
I don't know if that's part of your of the children's book, but many years ago, we did a children's play about Abraham, and it ended with but it started with him just running out in the fields and asking, where did all this come from? What is it? And they pointed up to the sun. So he looked at the sun, but then at night, when it got dark, the sun wasn't there anymore. So it can't be the sun, because the darkness is overruling. So maybe it's the darkness. But then the moon came out. So he said, well, then maybe it's the moon that's more powerful. And then the stars came out, and he thought maybe it was the stars. But then in the daylight, the stars and the moon disappeared and the sun came back. And he kept realizing that, there was no one thing that was consistently in charge. And that's where he extrapolated, that there's got to be something that's controlling all of them. And that was part of the way that we explained it to the children.
So that's a sort of a cute way of drawing out the philosophical reasoning or the inductive reasoning that Abraham uses to arrive at one God. That part is not in the Midrash, but that's sort of an artistic and sort of entertaining way of thinking about how the process unfolded. But indeed, this approach is sort of, I think, paired with the philosophical school in Judaism. By the medieval thinkers who saw Abraham as the first Aristotelian, the first metaphysician who was able to use his mind to arrive at God. And we don't typically think of the Torah and even any book of Tanakh as being really philosophically organized in that way, by using sort of logical proofs to arrive at God. So it's a little bit anachronistic, but nevertheless, the medievalists held that this was, the way that it originally happened. And with a little bit of intellectual humility, I think we can say that this might have been a projection of their cultural ethos, where they were reclaiming the rule of and the power of rational thinking, and so they wanted to insert that into the origin of ethical monotheism by making Abraham sort of the progenitor of that effort. Yeah, Janice.
No, thank you. I mean, how do we balance what we know, what God created millions of years ago with our calendar of 5,783? Could you just remind me of how we...
So that's a huge question about the age of the universe versus the description we have in Breshit from 2 weeks ago. And I've spoken about this in the past, but I'll just give you a reference to a book called Genesis and the Big Bang by Gerald Schroeder, who brings several different approaches. Among them are that there were, a few days before the sun and the moon were created, which might have been a long, period of time, and that all of the days in creation are not, what we think of in terms of 24 hours, but they could have been, millions of years. So that's one approach on, standing on one foot to reconcile science and Torah. But that would I encourage you to read that book.
I just wondered where we came up with the year 5783. I know that Torah was given in 2448 BCE, but
yeah. So you can look there if you want more, or we can talk offline.
Okay.
I want to move to the third explanation for Abraham's origin, and this is a midrash that is on the first pasuk in our parsha, and I'll read it and translate here. It's the final source on the source sheet. So Vayomer Hashem el Avraham lech lecha me'artzecha. So he says, leave your land. Rabbi Yitzchak patach. So Rabbi Yitzchak opened up his drasha. Right, patach is sort of a language of that. This is how he began to expound the weekly portion. So Shimi bat Uri'i v'hati aznech v'shilchiamech ubeit avich. So he said, listen, my daughter, and draw your ear, and forget your people and your father's house. So what is this pasuk from Tehillim referring to? Oftentimes this was the style in which Tanaim would give a sermon. They would start by quoting an enigmatic sort of verse and say how it explains something from the parsha. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak shared a mashal, a story, le'achad shahaya over mimakom lakom. This is compared to a person who is traveling and going from place to place. V'ra'ah bira achad doleket, and he saw some sort of structure that was doleket. What does doleket mean?
On fire or glowing.
Okay, so the translation here is a glow, which I think is important because a glow can have different connotations. It could mean that it's illuminated, or it could mean that it's on fire. Those have very different connotations. If something is illuminated, then there's something beautiful and radiant about it. And if there's something that's on fire, that's burning, there's something that's going wrong. That's something that's dangerous and destructive about it. So this man who is taking a hike through the desert notices that there is this structure off in the distance where that is a glow. And maybe he can't even tell from so far away whether it's on fire or whether there is some sort of radiant light that is emanating from it. So Amar, this passer buyer says, Tamar Shabir Hazu below Manhig. Is it possible that this bira has no landlord, has no owner, has no builder? And the word bira, the translation in this Sepharia source has it as a castle. So this isn't just a a shack, but there's something very ornate and something very exquisite about this building. It's something that took a long time to make and a lot of thought went into it. So this person who is noticing this beautiful structure that seems to be aglow calls out and said, "Who's in charge? Who is running this place?" Heitzitz alav bal habira, and he hears a voice from somewhere respond, Amar lo, anihu bal habira, I am the owner of the building. So, kach lefi shehaya avinu Avraham omer, tamar shahalam hazeh b'lo manhig. So too, Avraham was looking out at the world and was wondering, who's in charge of this place? Heitzitz alav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then God answered and says, Anihu bal ha'olam, I am the master of this world. So the reason why this midrash is so rich and so illustrative is because it begins with Avraham noticing something that is unusual about the world around him and wondering who is the power that's in charge of it. And of course, we can take this in two very different directions. If what's wrong with the world or the building, the structure, the castle, is that it's on fire, then Abraham's beginning started with a sense of injustice. How could there be so much suffering in the world? How could so many people be in so much pain and nobody is doing anything about it? The other option would be to say the world is just overflowing with beauty and good, and I want to know, who's responsible for all that pleasure and all that joy and all that enlightenment, right? So Abraham's curiosity could have come from two very different motivations based on how we interpret this midrash, but it begins with him noticing something unusual. And I want to read together from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs how he interpreted this midrash as a call to social justice, as Abraham's beginning of faith to be about seeing the world on fire and realizing that God needs him to be able to put out the flames. So let's take some turns reading Rabbi Sachs's words, because I can't do justice myself, given his poetic capacity. So if you can see the screen that you can read from it. Hillary, are you able to see the screen? Can you take a turn with the first paragraph here? We'll just have to unmute you.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is an enigmatic midrash. It is far from obvious what it means. In my book, A Letter in the Scroll, I argued that Abraham was struck by the contradiction between the order of the universe, the palace, and the disorder of humanity, the flames. How, in a world created by a good God, could there be so much evil? If someone takes the trouble to build a palace, do they leave it to the flames? If someone takes the trouble to create a universe, does he leave it to be disfigured by his own creations? On this reading, what moved Abraham was not philosophical harmony, but moral discord. For Abraham, faith began in cognitive dissonance. There is only one way of resolving this dissonance, by protesting evil and fighting it.
Thank you. So this read of the Midrash has Abraham being God's partner. in being charged to do something about the flames, to put them out. Because when Hashem responds and says, I'm the owner of the building, what's the implication there for Abraham? Abraham, you would think, would be saying, then if you built it, then you're responsible for it. But Hashem says, no, I'm the owner, but you are responsible for it. It's yours now. I created it. And fundamentally, I am still responsible for it, but right now it's in your hands. The silence of Hashem in responding to Abraham's request to do something about the flames indicates that Hashem is expecting Abraham's partnership to protest evil and to fight it, right? To observe the dissonance in the world between the order and the disorder, and to try and do something to make it more orderly and more structured and more fair and more pleasant to be in.
You used the word partnership, but before you said God wanted Abraham to to take responsibility, to take the flames. And I was expecting you to say that God and Abraham together would try to do social justice. Yeah.
Well, I think that is the partnership.
Okay.
Okay, let's get a volunteer to read the next paragraph. Esther, are you able to take a turn? Is that, you want to give it a try?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
This is a poignant meaning of the Midrash when it says that the owner of the palace looked out and said, I am the owner of the palace. It is as if God were saying to Abraham, I need you to help me put out the flames. How could that possibly be so? God is all powerful. Human beings are all too powerless. How could God be saying to Abraham, I need you to help me put out the flames?
Okay, can you continue with the next one too? That was a short one.
Okay, the answer is that evil exists because God gave humans the gift of freedom. Without freedom, we would not disobey God's laws. But at the same time, we would be no more than robots programmed to do whatever our Creator designed us to do. Freedom and its misuse are the theme of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and the generation of the flood. Why did God not intervene? Why did he not stop the first humans eating the forbidden fruit or prevent Cain from killing Abel?
Great. These are big questions about why God doesn't intervene when evil is happening. And the answer that Rabbi Sachs is giving is, this is part of the lesson to humanity, is that if you're going to have choice and freedom, then that necessitates being able to make choices that lead to bad things, to use freedom to harm other people. Those two go hand in hand. That's the risk of allowing people their freedom, is that they can use it for evil. Mark, are you able to take the next paragraph?
I'll give it a try. I certainly can't duplicate Hillary's beautiful British accent, much less Rabbi Sachs. Why did the owner of the palace not put out the flames? Because by giving us freedom, he bound himself from intervening in the human situation. If he stopped us every time we were about to do wrong, we would have no freedom. We would never mature, never learn from our errors, never become God's image. We exist as free agents only because of God's tzimtzum, his self-limitation. That is why within the terms with which he created humankind, he cannot put out the flames of human evil.
Okay, so we just unpacked a little bit more about why Hashem can't intervene if he wants us to mature from making our choices and learning about the consequences of our choices, to be able to become more like God in doing the right thing all the time. If that's gonna come from us, then we need the ability to get it wrong in order to learn from that, to be able to get it right. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
but we were allowed to eat from the tree of life, but we couldn't after we ate from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. I mean, if we had, we would have lived forever in a bad state, the ability to do bad. So why was that tree allowed to be eaten from?
That's exactly the point that he is making, which is that the option was given to humankind to do something that was wrong.
No, I mean the tree of life.
Well,
If-
it's the you're saying because they should eat it from the tree of life, but not from the Eitz Hadat.
Right,
So
they were
there was
allowed to eat from every tree except the Eitz Hadat.
Right. Right. So like everything, there are choices for good and choices for bad, and there need to be options for both in order for the choice to be meaningful.
Right. But since they ate from the tree of knowledge, what if they had eaten from the tree of life? They never would have died, and their generations would all keep living.
It's hard to speculate what human history would have been like if that didn't happen. But the fact that God gives mankind the choice to begin with indicates that the design was from the very beginning to allow for there to be failure.
Right. No, maybe they just left Gan Eden before they could eat from the tree of life.
They
It's
did.
possible.
It's just like Robert's Frost poem, "The Road Not Taken." Once you choose one way, I can always go back, but no, you can't go back, because as soon as they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Hashem expelled them from the garden. It says he expelled them from the garden lest they eat from the tree of life. He expelled them before they had the chance. It says
Thank you for that clarification, Amy. Okay.
Janie, do you want to take the last two paragraphs here? From He Needs Our Help. Oop, I think you're still on mute. There you go.
He needs our help. That is why he chose Abraham. Abraham was the first person in recorded history to protest the injustice of the world in the name of God, rather than accept it in the name of God. Abraham was the man who said, "Shall the judge of all the earth not do justly?" Where Noah accepted, Abraham did not. Abraham is the man of whom God said, "I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just." Abraham was the father of a nation, a faith, a civilization marked throughout the ages by what Albert Einstein called an almost fanatical love of justice.
Great. So just to conclude this piece, Rabbi Sachs always sort of does a little bit of an ani ma'amin, like an I believe, at the end of each of his pieces in this book. And the one that concludes this piece reads as follows: I believe that Abraham is the father of faith, not as acceptance, but as protest. Protest at the flames that threaten the palace, the evil that threatens God's gracious world. We fight those flames by acts of justice and compassion that deny evil its victory and bring the world that is a little closer to the world that ought to be.
But didn't we say
magnificent.
Moses did that when
This
he
is-
struck the?
Right now he's talking about Abraham, how Abraham, when he argues for justice in Sodom, he is someone who doesn't accept the status quo. He fights against the injustice that other people have made by trying to bring more justice. And the mistakes that other people make, he responds with compassion. And that's how he partners with God to put out the flames that exist in the world as a result of people's poor choices. And ultimately, he assumes the role of firefighter. That's Abraham's faith. Abraham's faith is not acceptance, but it's protest. It's trying to bring the world that is closer to the world that ought to be. So we can appreciate how this midrash and how Rabbi Sachs interprets it has quite a lot of power to a world of social justice, of the call that we have as Jews to rectify the wrongs that are around us. When vulnerable people are taken advantage of, it's upon us to step up, but that often happens, with the ger, the atom, and the almanah, with those that have the least support structure in our society. That's the foreigner, the immigrant, the one that doesn't have an immediate family, the widower, the divorcee, the orphan. And those are the people that need our attention in order to make the world a better place, and to put out the flames of people who are taking advantage of those vulnerable people. And so this is the the palace in flames. This is the metaphor for the world that we live in. And Abraham, his origin story is about the fact that he notices that things are not going well, and he's willing to roll up his sleeves and to do something about it. And we see that throughout his life, that he fights injustice. He doesn't just accept it and move on. He doesn't just care about his own, small world and ignore the broader context. And of course, there's always a question of how much of a fight do we need to put up, because there is an endless amount of fire that's burning across the globe. And so we have to understand our specific talents and our skill set and our resources and our sphere of influence, and do what we can with what we have to make a dent in the injustices in the world, to make them, to rectify them. So it's a beautiful, really uplifting, I think, and inspiring piece by Rabbi Sachs here about Abraham's reason for being chosen. He is chosen because of what he notices and his willingness to join God's fight against evil. Any thoughts or reflections on this piece by Rabbi Sachs this week?
So there's the midrash that attaches this to the beginning of the parsha when Abraham is told to go, and that, of course, is the midrash of. We learned that Nimrod had become powerful and he was the king, and Abraham got in his crosshairs, and so Nimrod threw Abraham into the fiery furnace, and the flames did not hit him. And then, of course, it said that, and then his brother Haran went in there and the flames did burn him alive, which is, he died young, but Abraham unscathed. And Haran was the father of Lot. Abraham married Iscah, who was Sarah, who was Haran's daughter, and Nahor married Milcah, who was Haran's other daughter. But even Nahor wasn't like Abraham, and Haran wasn't like Abraham, but Abraham was the one who went through the fire, came out unscathed, and because it was, at that point, I'm sure that Terah had to move with the family that was left, because the king Nimrod was not happy, and that's why he left, but he only went as far as Haran and didn't go any farther, and Hashem tells Abraham to go the rest of the journey. And I think that's the story that kind of links the two pieces.
Well, indeed, the question is, when did the story of the palace and the flames happen? Was it how far after? How long after the flames of the Kivshan Ha'esh of that Abraham was thrown into? What merit did Abraham have to be saved from those flames? Right. It would seem that Abraham, there's a long series of events that happens with Abraham, and the midrash that we focused on this morning about the palace in flames is far along in the sequence. But Abraham already had other merit upon which to be saved from the cauldron of flames earlier that he was thrown into. But I never before connected the flames of one with the flames of the other. So literarily, I think that's a fascinating link that you're making. Any other? Yeah, Hillary.
One of the things we talked about last week was about how, in order to make Torah meaningful, we use our own experiences to create and understand the metaphors of the past and to create our own metaphors. And this idea of flames, of fire, just seems to be so apt for someone like Rabbi Sachs, who is basically only one generation post the flames of the crematorium and the of the Holocaust. And so I think that it's sort of an interesting point to think about how fire is connected with evil in this in the way that we're interpreting both the midrash in the story, but also the immediate metaphor of our experiences and what helps us relate to what is evil in our own world.
Yeah, it's a brilliant, I think, historical observation that fire obviously is a powerful force that can be used and harnessed for good. All of us benefit from using fire for our cooking and for warming our homes, but obviously it can be used for great and grave mass destruction, as in the Holocaust. So Rabbi Sachs, who was, trying to inspire a generation after the Holocaust, was trying to inspire people who saw those flames that Abraham saw as evil, and wanting to put them out by doing good. And that's why Rabbi Sachs, I think, has such a universal appeal to not just Orthodox observant Jews, but to liberal progressive Jews who raise the banner of social justice very high in terms of their list of priorities, of Jewish priorities. And having this be Abraham's founding narrative, I think, gives credibility to some of those sentiments. Of course, as observant Jews, we think of social justice as being very important, along with other things that are also very important. It's in a panoply of values and priorities, but not the exclusive or most significant one. Okay, well, thank you for that reflection, Hillary. Appreciate that. Any other brief thoughts before we close for the week?
What is the Hebrew word for the when Moshe saw the bush that was in flames? That's not the same word, is it? Or is it?
I couldn't hear you. It cut out a bit.
The bush that Moshe saw that was a flame. Is it the same word or is it a different word?
The aish.
And that's snap. The bush, the burning bush. It's not the same as
no. It's not. It's boer. So it's but it's it's the same metaphor but using a different verb.
Yeah. I was thinking about the flame of when the Talmuds were burned in France and Germany and England, and also when human being Jews were burned during the Spanish Inquisition. It's in addition to Shoah, flames have been used for
throughout human history. They've been manipulated for good and bad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for your insights. And it was wonderful to learn together this morning. Looking forward to continuing again next week. I'll wish you a wonderful day and Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Oh, thank you. Bye-bye, Rabbi Cheses.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.